Welcome to Tansson TV Plus. Of course, I'm Brandon.
And I'm Mom.
Thank you so much for joining us. We always love doing this. And Mom, we have another season premiere for this fall season.
Yes, we're going to talk about Night Court.
Yes, and this is the third season that we are going into. And Mom, are you ready for the discussion?
I am, Brandon.
Yeah, and so we can go ahead and get started.
Alrighty. This is going to be real brief. This episode, and actually it's a two-parter that we're going to talk about, is really about Dan and Dan possibly being the father of Abby's boyfriend. So that's what we're here to discover. Is Dan the father?
Well, Mom, thank you so much for that.
You're welcome, Brandon.
And yes, and the title alludes to this just as well. And so the episodes are The Judge's Boyfriend's Dead, Part 1 and Part 2, from November 19th and 26th.
Yes.
But, Mom, first of all, what did you think about this two-part episode?
Well, I thought it was fine, Brandon. I was amused when it ended last year, the last season rather, and so I was anxious to see the first episode, and so I thought they did a nice job of tying them both together. I didn't necessarily think it had to be a two-parter, but they did a nice job of tying both the ending and then the beginning of the season together.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. I think this was an interesting way to that they were able to leave off the second season with floating if Abby's boyfriend is potentially related to Dan. And so I thought that was a nice way, and I agree. I don't know if it necessarily needed to be a two-parter, although I will say that, but for being a two-parter, though, I would say that, in my thought, Part 1 didn't actually feel like sort of like continuing with the story.
Yeah, well, and they threw in another storyline, too, and that would be that we've got a new prosecutor named Julianne, and so they did have to bring that in and give her a little bit of a backstory and a storyline too to start it off.
Yes, and so Julianne, she had been on the show twice before, season 1 and season 2, just as a guest, and so it's interesting, like I said, to bring her in as the new prosecutor, but yeah, to replace Olivia, who they wrote off and said that she went to go work for some big law firm.
Yes. Yeah, so what did you think of Julianne?
Well, I will say that the character of Julianne, even though, of course, I'm disappointed that Olivia is no longer in the show, because I did like her as a character and her actress as well. But I will say that having Julianne there, I think, adds another layer to Night Court, the show, in the sense that thus far, I think the main dynamic, I think you might be able to agree with me on this, but the main dynamic within this revival has largely been between Abby and Dan.
It has been, yes.
But I think while I do enjoy the other characters, I feel like a lot of times, at least within these first two seasons, that the other ones weren't able to be as naturally added to the plot, per se, that they were sort of always doing their own thing, or it felt really awkward trying to throw everybody into a single plot point.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of storyline they really do give Julianne throughout her time on the show. You're right in the fact that Olivia, to me, she just kind of floated out there. She wasn't a character that was quite grounded in the series. And so I barely remembered her storylines going through. And so hopefully they'll be able to give Julianne some of these storylines.
But for Julianne, she's someone that can really get under Dan's skin, as we saw within her two previous guest appearances, and even though we didn't see her in the original show, they gave her, back during her first appearance in season 1, an interesting backstory saying that she has previously been in jail because Dan was the prosecutor at that time for Night Court. And so even though it's off screen, it feels very believable. And so she had previously won revenge on Dan. So it's interesting to now see the coworkers.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting. And I know that one of the main topics you wanted to talk about was actually Jake. And is he related to Dan?
Yeah, and so that was definitely an interesting plot point. And we do find out that he is.
He is not related to Dan. I'm sorry,
yes.
Spoiler.
But yes. But what made things interesting, part 1, though, is that there was a prospect, though, that instead of being related to Dan, he could have been related to Abby.
Yeah, and that did make me giggle, because I was not expecting that one.
Yeah, and so that also turned out to be negative as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and even though, what are your thoughts? But I think I was pretty sure that that he was not going to end up being related to Dan.
I kind of went up in the air. I couldn't decide what they were going to do. Um, I figured overall that he would not be related to him, especially when they started having them bond the way they did. But if they had him related, I think it still would have been okay.
Yeah, and my thought is when they be in my thought because of the way that they had proposed it, I thought it wasn't going to happen. But I think if they hadn't made a big deal of it, I think they would have. And I don't know. To me, I always feel that for a lot of shows, especially successful shows and shows that have been like revivals of some kind, that they try to make a big deal out of trying to make everyone related at some point in time or another by the end. So that's where I thought they were potentially going with this. But once I saw it was a two-part, I knew it couldn't be possible.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
But yeah, and now say so. Going back though, what are your thoughts overall about Jake? Because even though we saw him in season two, I don't know. I didn't really pay attention much to his character prior to this point.
No, actually, kind of like with you, I didn't really pay that much attention to him. He was just another boyfriend for Abby, and so not that she had that many of them, but she was just another boyfriend for him. So I really didn't pay that much attention to him until they kind of brought the point up in the last episode.
But yeah, and so yeah, like I said, the same thing I thought. But I really liked his bonding with Dan, just because, as I mentioned before, Dan's not a people person, nor has he really ever been. But he doesn't really per se bond with the other characters outside the force bonding that Abby has him do.
Yeah, but one thing by having this character there, we were able to see that Dan and Abby actually did bond quite a bit, through scenes, of course, that they're not airing, but they are able to show that they do have a bond together, that they do activities outside of the courtroom.
Yeah, such as their book club.
Yep, the book club, going to baseball games, and so yeah, so I like the way they were able to show that Dan kind of had a little bit of a personal side.
But yeah, very secluded personal side, but a personal side
Yes.
nevertheless.
Yes. Yeah. Were there any other plot points that you thought were important to note for this premiere episode?
Not necessarily. Let's say I think it was interesting. Let's say having Julianne add to let's say the plot, just because I feel like she just naturally like fits in. I'm not sure about you, but I feel like sort of like with the essence of the way that this modern take on the show is going, that I feel like with just the way that her character's presence is, that I think you already sort of, I don't know, in my thoughts, she just feels like a part of the show already.
Yeah, she does. She does. Are there any parts that you're, besides Julianne's storyline, are there any other parts that you're looking forward to for this upcoming season?
In terms of this upcoming season, I would like to see a little bit more grounded storylines, and I think one thing that the show is doing its best to tap into, and I think it does well, is showing some of the extravagant aspects of Night Court, in the sense that, like as we saw in the original, or at least as you saw in the original, I should say, and for me, for the few episodes I've seen, is that there are some pretty crazy things that do happen, but I definitely think this modern take sort of takes it to the extreme in some cases, and so I'd like to see a little bit more grounded storylines.
Yeah, that too. And I'd like to actually see them do more. I know they do cases each week, but I kind of like to see them do some more cases and kind of go back to what it's called, the night court portion of it.
Yeah, because I mean, even though they do cases, like I noticed a lot of them, like they start off the episodes with some cases, but I feel like we don't get a lot of like the whole episode is this one case sort of ones, at least not in a while.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll have to see if that's what something that they decide to do, for this season.
Yeah, and I'd also like to see them too, even though of course it's its own show. I'd like to see them do a little bit more tributes to the original. Like at the end of the second season, they had actually connected it back to the original one in sense of the relationship between Dan and Christine.
Oh yeah, they did bring that up. So yeah, so it would be nice for them to kind of push that a little bit more. I know they did bring Roz back for a few episodes, and it was actually nice to see her back. So to be able to bring Roz back to kind of tie it in would be nice.
But yeah, so I like that they're able to, let's say, pay homage to the original show, and I'd just like to see just a little bit more of that, just for some of those other characters, and continue tying up those sort of loose ends.
Yep, same here. Same here.
But yeah, and one thing I do miss in this third season, the second one as well, is that they did get rid of the short intro that they had back in season one.
Oh yeah, I always like my intro, and it disappeared altogether.
So yeah, so I'm sure it's probably because they changed the cast a little bit, but the original show changes cast quite a bit too.
Oh, they changed the cast quite a bit. Is not even the word. A lot. Yeah.
So yeah, so glad to see that it's able to pay homage in that regard of revolving door of people.
Yes.
But mom, are you ready to go ahead and end out our discussion for Night Court?
Yeah, we thank everyone here for watching today. And let us know if you've enjoyed the first few episodes of Night Court. On the day of this recording, Night Court comes on again tonight. And so we'll be sitting here watching. So thank you guys for watching. Feel free to subscribe if you'd like. And have a great day, everybody.
And we'll see you next time.
All right. Bye bye.